Hey guys, tonight we're checking back into the same gloriously miserable institution we visited once before, the Frontier Boarding House. Except this time, you're not one of the 40 men. This time you're the one woman in the building who isn't being paid to be here, and the distinction is going to cost you 4 times the going rate. Not the bonneted sweetheart in a clean calico dress that 100 westerns have filed in your memory. Not the schoolmarm with the tidy bun and the suitor at the gate. The actual version, the one that smelled like wet wool and lamp oil and 40 men who had collectively decided that bathing was a special occasion. 1 bolt on 1 door. A trunk full of books. And a contract in your pocket that ends the day you fall in love. If grim, oddly soothing history is your kind of bedtime listening, hit the like button and subscribe. Only if you genuinely enjoy drifting off to mildly disturbing, deeply factual history. Special shout out to everyone who asked for the other side of the boarding house after the last one. You wanted to know where the women slept, and the short answer is behind the only door that locked. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Wherever you are, it's quietly gone 3 a.m. somewhere on this map. Statistically, at least one of you is lying in a bed nobody can enter without your permission, which is a luxury the woman in this story would have recognized immediately and paid dearly for. Settle in, kill the overhead light, and ease the covers up around your shoulders. Maybe tuck them a little tighter on the side nearest the door, the way you would if the latch were the only thing between you and the hallway. Have you ever wondered where a respectable woman actually slept in a town built almost entirely for men? What it cost, in coin, in scrutiny, in sleep, to be the rare exception in a house full of strangers? Whether the lice and the bedbugs made any distinction at all between a labourer and a lady, and what it meant that they didn't. How a young woman managed a body, a reputation, and a monthly cycle in a building with 1 basin, 1 towel, and 1 outhouse for 40. Why the only profession that would pay her also forbade her to marry. And what, exactly, a marriage proposal sounds like when it's delivered across a plate of salt pork by a man who has not yet asked your name. Congratulations. You've just stepped down from the evening stage into Leadville, Colorado, 1879. The street is ankle deep and the air is thin enough to make your heart work. You have a satchel, a trunk coming behind you, and a letter that says there is a schoolhouse here and a widow named Mary Murphy who keeps a clean house and a closed mouth. Good luck. You walk in at 8:30 in the evening, and the proprietress, a woman who runs a 40-foot by 20-foot establishment on the edge of a Colorado silver camp, is standing behind a small wooden counter that used to be a packing crate. You have come to rent the one thing in this building that the 40 men sleeping here cannot have at any price, which is a door that closes between you and them. You pay her $2. She does not give you a key. She gives you a bolt, a bent iron bar on a bracket, screwed into green pine by someone who understood exactly what he was selling. $2 is 4 times what a man pays for a slot in a shared bed. You know this because the rate card is nailed to the wall behind her head, and the rate card does not pretend otherwise. 50 cents buys a man a position in a mattress. $2 buys you the absence of other people. In a town with this ratio of men to women, the absence of other people is the single most expensive commodity on the board, and Mary Murphy has priced it accordingly, because Mary Murphy did not survive 2 husbands and a silver camp by underpricing the one thing everybody actually wants. She is 38 years old. She has the face of a woman who has heard every version of every story and has stopped being moved by any of them, which is not the same as being unkind. She looks at you the way a customs officer looks at a trunk, not hostile, just thorough, the look of a woman who is patient, unhurried, and entirely unimpressed. A young woman travelling alone with a satchel of books and a letter about a schoolhouse. She has seen this arrival before. She knows how it usually goes. The letter is in your glove. You don't show it unless asked. You've learned that a letter explains too much and protects too little. She slides a ledger around and asks for your name, your business, and how many nights. You give her all 3 in the fewest words that will satisfy a careful woman. Schoolteacher, arrived on the evening stage. 1 night, until the board can place you with a family. She writes it down in a hand that slopes hard to the right, and you notice there is a 4th column on the page, narrow, and she does not ask you anything to fill it, which means she intends to fill it herself, later, based on what she observes. You decide, standing there, to be observed favourably. The room she gives you is not a room so much as a closet that has been promoted. It is off the kitchen, behind the chimney, 6 feet by 8, and it has the one luxury the rest of the house lacks: a frame, a door, and the bolt you just rented. It also has the chimney's heat, which the men upstairs would trade a week's wages for, and which you did not ask for, and will be grateful for by 2 in the morning. Mary hands you a stub of candle and a tin cup of water that she draws from a covered pail, not the open one, which you do not yet understand is a courtesy until you have been here long enough to see what the men drink from. She tells you breakfast is at 5, that the bolt works if you lift the door slightly on its hinge before you throw it, and that no man in this house has a reason to be on this side of the kitchen after dark. She says this last part not as reassurance but as policy, the way a woman states a thing she intends to personally enforce. A man named Cobb, paying his 50 cents at the counter behind you, watches this entire transaction with the frank, unhurried interest of someone pricing a horse he cannot afford. He is not menacing. He is just counting. Mary catches it, holds his eye for 1 flat second, and Cobb finds something else to look at. That second is, you will come to understand, the actual thing your $2 purchased. The bolt is just the receipt. You stand in the doorway of your 6 by 8 room, and you do something that nobody else in this building will do tonight. You look at a bed that belongs, for the next 9 hours, entirely to you. No one is in it. No one is waiting in the hallway for you to leave it. The sheets are not warm from a previous occupant, because there is no previous occupant, because you are paying $2 specifically so that the phrase previous occupant does not apply to your night. This is the inverse of everything happening on the other side of the wall, and you can hear the difference even now. Upstairs, the bed is a business. It runs in shifts. A day shift man climbs out at dawn and a night shift man climbs into the dent he leaves, and the sheets do not get changed between them, and the warmth of one stranger's body is simply inherited by the next, like a debt that never gets paid off, only transferred. The men call it hot bunking. You will lie here alone and listen to it happen through a single plank wall, and you will not be able to decide whether what you feel is comfort or guilt. Your sheets are cold, and the cold is the entire point. They are cold because you put them on the frame yourself, from the folded square Mary handed you. The men upstairs have not slept on a sheet of their own laundering in months. You have, tonight. The mattress is a canvas sack stuffed with straw, the same as theirs, and it makes the same sound when you sit on it. A long, slow, and faintly editorial crackle, like a document being slowly reconsidered. Respectability did not buy you a better mattress. It bought you exclusive use of an identical one. The straw shifts under your weight and settles into a shape, and the shape is yours alone, which is more than the man 4 feet away through the wall can say about anything he will touch tonight. You set your trunk against the far wall. It is the heaviest thing you own and the most valuable, and not for the reason a thief would guess. It holds 2 dresses, a comb, a Bible, a slate, a primer, and 41 books, which is the entire material foundation of the only profession that will pay you. A man guards his boots because his boots are his solvency. You guard your trunk because your trunk is your livelihood, your character reference, and your one argument that you are who your letter says you are. There is a small window high in the wall, painted shut by a previous tenant or a previous winter. You test it out of habit. It does not move. You file this under the same heading the men upstairs file their stuck latch under, a problem with no solution and a long memory, and you move on, because there is nothing else to do with a window that has decided. Through the wall, a man laughs at something, and 3 other men tell him to be quiet, and the laugh subsides into the general low rumble of 40 exhausted bodies negotiating a small space. The sound is not threatening. It is, if anything, lonely. You sit on your cold, exclusive, and crackling bed with your candle stub burning down, and you understand that you have purchased the one thing in this house worth purchasing, and that the price of it is being, very precisely, the only person in the building who is by herself. You do not undress for bed. This is the first thing you learned before you ever came west, and the boarding house confirms it within the first hour. The men upstairs sleep in their clothes because the room is cold and their possessions are safer on their bodies. You sleep in yours for those reasons too, and for a third that is yours alone, which is that a woman who is dressed can account for herself, and a woman who is not is at the mercy of whoever opens the door and whatever story he decides to tell about it afterward. So the corset stays on. This is not a small thing. A corset is not sleepwear. It is architecture, and sleeping in it is roughly like sleeping in a fence. But unlacing it requires either privacy or help, and you have arranged your entire night around the principle that you will require neither. You loosen the bottom two laces with the contortionist's reach every woman of the era has perfected. You let out exactly enough breath to make the next 9 hours survivable, and you leave the rest. Your ribs will have an opinion by morning. You have already overruled it. Then comes the chair. The room has one, a three-legged thing that wobbles toward whichever leg you trust least, and you tilt it under the doorknob, wedging the top rail beneath the knob so the door cannot swing inward even if the bolt fails. The bolt is iron and you paid for it, but the bolt was installed by a stranger and you have known it for 40 minutes, and trust, out here, is a thing you extend slowly and revoke instantly. The chair is your second opinion, silent, stubborn, and incorruptible. It costs nothing, and it has never once been bribed. Then the trunk. You drag it the 3 feet from the far wall and set it against the chair so that the door is now defended in depth. Bolt, then chair, then 110 pounds of books. A man would find this excessive. You find it the bare minimum a sensible woman does in a building she cannot see into. The arrangement takes 4 minutes, and it is the most important architecture you will build tonight. A woman named Adeline, in the kitchen earlier, watched you eye the door and said only, without looking up from her mending, the chair, not just the bolt. She has the cough that means she will not be teaching school anywhere next year, and she has been in houses like this longer than you, and she offered you the single most useful sentence anyone has said to you since the stage. You said thank you. She nodded at her mending. That was the whole exchange, and it was, in its way, an entire education. You lie down on top of the blanket rather than under it, boots off but placed where your hand can find them, because a woman who has to leave a room quickly does not want to do it barefoot down a splintered hall. The candle is out. The corset holds you in a shape that is not restful but is, at least, ready. Through the floor and the wall, the house breathes its 40-throated breath. Somebody snores. Somebody coughs the cough. The piano 2 doors down plays the same 7-bar fragment it has played since you arrived, badly, with the dogged confidence of a man who believes the 8th bar will come to him eventually. You listen to all of it from inside your small fortified closet, fully dressed, ribs protesting, one hand near your boots, and you think the thought that every woman in your position has thought in every camp from Nevada to the Dakotas, tomorrow I will be tired, and tired is survivable, and the alternative to tired is the thing the chair is for. You take the letter out of your glove once the chair is wedged and the candle relit, and you read it again, not because you have forgotten what it says, but because reading it is a way of confirming that the schoolhouse is real and the journey had a destination. Folded inside it is the other document, the one that actually governs your life, which is the contract the district sent ahead for your signature. You have read it 11 times. You read it a 12th, by candlelight, in a closet behind a chimney, because it is the reason you are here and the cage you have agreed to live in. The pay is on the first line, and it is the first insult. You will earn, for teaching every child in this camp to read, roughly 1/3 of what a man would earn for the same work. This is not an oversight. It is a stated philosophy. School committees back east put it in writing decades ago that a woman is naturally suited to the instruction of small children and can therefore be hired for a fraction of a man's wage, the natural suitability and the fractional wage being, conveniently, the same sentence. You will be paid less precisely because you are good at it. You have made your peace with this the way you make peace with weather. The second insult is quieter and lives further down the page. In the conduct clauses, you are to attend church. You are not to keep company with men, you are not to be seen in a saloon, a dance hall, or any establishment where liquor is served, which in this town narrows your available routes considerably. You are to comport yourself, at all hours, as a person whose private life is the property of a school board composed of men you have not met. The contract does not use the word reputation, but reputation is the entire subject of every line. And then the clause that is not an insult so much as a trapdoor. You are to remain unmarried. Marriage ends the contract. The day you become a wife, you cease to be a teacher, because the district's position, never stated but never in doubt, is that a married woman belongs to a husband, and an unmarried woman belongs to the school, and a woman who belongs to herself is not a category the form makes room for. Out here, where a woman of 22 is considered to be rounding the far turn of the marriage market, this clause is not abstract. It will be tested, in person, possibly at breakfast. The cruelty of it is structural and almost elegant. The town is full of men who will want to marry you, partly because you are one of the few unmarried women they will ever meet, and the one quality that makes you marriageable, being here, being respectable, being the schoolteacher, is the exact quality you forfeit by saying yes. You are desirable because of the job, and the job dissolves the moment you act on the desire. A man named, let us say anyone, can court you and keep his livelihood. You cannot court back and keep yours. You fold the contract along its established creases and put it back inside the letter and the letter back inside your glove. Adeline, in the next account of this house, would tell you the contract is the lightest thing in your trunk and the heaviest thing you carry, and she would be right. The books weigh 110 pounds. The single folded page weighs your whole future. You blow out the candle, the piano finds briefly an eighth bar, then loses it again. You decide that is a reasonable description of hope, and you close your eyes. You learn, around 10 o'clock, exactly how thin a plank wall is, because the men on the other side of yours begin the long nightly process of arranging 40 bodies into a space built for a dozen, and you can hear every decision. The wall is a single thickness of green pine with gaps the rags don't cover, and it transmits the boarding house the way a drumhead transmits a finger. You are not in the room. You can hear the room as if you were lying in the middle of it. The arithmetic on the other side is brutal, and you can follow it by ear. A bed that sleeps one comfortably is sleeping two. A bed that sleeps two is, in the boom weeks, sleeping three, two men head to foot and a third laid crosswise at the bottom with his shoulders against the other's shins. You hear the negotiation of it, which is not words so much as grunts, shifts, the dry crackle of three men's combined weight settling onto one straw sack, and a final stillness that means everyone has accepted a position they will regret by morning. On your side of the wall, you are one person in a bed built for one, and the unfairness of this runs in the direction nobody expects, because the luxury is yours and you cannot enjoy it. You think about the sheets over there. The day shift man left them an hour ago, warm, and the night shift man has just inherited that warmth without inheriting clean linen, because the linen does not change between bodies, only the bodies change beneath the linen. The warmth of a stranger is a thing those men sleep inside of every night. You are lying on sheets that are cold because they are only yours, and you understand, listening to the wall, that cold and yours is the better deal, and that almost nobody in this building is getting it. A man over there is talking in his sleep. He is having a conversation with someone named Sarah, and the conversation is tender and one-sided, and entirely unaware that 39 other men and one schoolteacher can hear it. Nobody mocks him. That is the etiquette of the wall. What a man says to a Sarah who isn't there is his own business, and the room extends him the courtesy of pretending to be asleep. You extend it too, from your side, which is the only kindness you can offer a stranger you will never see. Then there is the cold, which arrives through the same gaps that carry the sound. The men have stuffed the seams with newspaper and rags, and by midnight some of it has worked loose, the way it always works loose, and a thin blade of Colorado air comes through at the level of your shoulder with the specific personal quality of a draft that has selected you. You pull the blanket higher. On the other side of the wall a man does the same and you hear it, and for a moment the two of you are doing the identical thing, 4 feet apart, divided by one plank and $2 and a set of rules neither of you wrote. The chimney at your back ticks and warms. This is the dividend of the closet nobody wanted. The heat the men upstairs would fight over comes to you for free, radiating off the brick, and you press your spine against the warm wall and let it do what the corset and the chair cannot, which is make you, for a few inches of your body, genuinely comfortable. The wall transmits one last shift, one last cough, one last fragment of the man and his Sarah, and then the room beyond settles into the heavy, breathing, and 40-throated quiet of people too tired to stay awake being unhappy. You lie in your half-warm fortress and join them in it. You feel the first one at around midnight, and you know exactly what it is before your conscious mind has finished waking, because some part of a travelling woman stays on duty for precisely this. A small, deliberate, unhurried movement across the skin below your collar, and a second on the inside of your wrist. Then you stop cataloguing individual events and accept the category, which is that the mattress you rented for $2 contains, at no extra charge, a population. Cymex lectularius is the formal name, And the formal name is doing a great deal of dignifying for a creature that lives in the seam where straw meets canvas and emerges at night to conduct its business across whatever warm body has been delivered to it. The bedbug does not consult the rate card. It does not know that you paid 4 times what the men paid, that your door has a bolt, that your contract requires you to attend church. It knows that you are warm and horizontal and present, which are the only 3 qualifications it has ever required of anyone. This is the great levelling fact of the boarding house, and you meet it at midnight on your first night. Respectability buys a door, not an exemption. The bolt keeps out cob. It does not keep out the inhabitants of the mattress, who were here before you, who pay no rent, and who regard the distinction between a schoolteacher and a mule skinner as a human affectation of no biological interest. Upstairs, 40 men are being bitten in the dark. Behind the chimney, 1 schoolteacher is being bitten in the dark. The bedbugs have achieved, in their small way, a perfect democracy. You do the thing the diaries all describe and none of them recommend, which is nothing. You cannot light the candle and hunt them. You would be up all night and lose. You cannot move. There is nowhere to move to. You can only manage them, which is the local word for a relationship in which one party has all the power and the other party is resolved not to discuss it. You adjust your collar, you tuck the blanket, you decide, with the full force of your will, that the warm spot on your hip is the chimney and not anything else, and you hold that decision the way you'd hold a heavy door. A woman named Adeline, the same one who told you about the chair, keeps, you noticed earlier, a small twist of dried herb in her pocket and lays it along her mattress seam at night. Pennyroyal, or tansy, or whatever the camp druggist swore by this season. It does not work, exactly, but it gives her something to do that feels like resistance, and out here the feeling of resistance is sometimes the only part of resistance available. You have no herb tonight. You make a note to acquire some, and you understand that the note is itself a kind of pennyroyal, useless against the bugs, useful against the despair. By 1 in the morning, the bites have arranged themselves across your wrist in a small, tidy row, 3 of them, evenly spaced, as if the bugs had measured. You will find more at dawn, along the collarbone and behind the knee, in the patterns the traveller's diaries describe with a resignation that reads, across the decades, almost as affection. They are not exceptional, they are ambient. They are simply the texture of sleeping indoors in a silver camp in 1879, and you fold yourself a little smaller against the warm brick and let the texture have you, because the alternative is to sit up all night being correct about it, and morning comes at 5 whether you have slept or not. A man in this house guards his boots. You have gathered this already from the way the men upstairs arrange their footwear under their heads like treasure, because boots cost a fortnight's wages, and a man without them cannot work, and a man who cannot work is finished. Boots are a man's solvency, and at night solvency is the thing that walks away in the dark. You lie behind your bolt and your chair and your trunk and take inventory of what you guard instead, and the list is different, and the difference is the whole story. You guard the trunk, yes, the books, the slate, the second dress, because those are your livelihood the way boots are a man's, but the trunk is the least of it. The thing you actually guard all night, the thing the bolt and the chair are truly for, does not fit in a trunk and cannot be stolen with hands. You are guarding your reputation, which is the only capital a woman in your position is permitted to accumulate, and which, unlike boots, cannot be replaced at the general store for $3. A man who loses his boots buys new boots. A woman who loses her good name does not buy a new one. There is no shelf for it. So you do the arithmetic that every respectable woman travelling alone does at the edge of sleep. The bolt is thrown. The chair is wedged. The trunk is against the chair. The window is painted shut, which tonight is a feature. The walls are thin, but the door is solid and defended in depth. You have, as far as a person can in a building full of strangers, made yourself an island, and you lie at the centre of the island and listen to the tide. The sounds you sought are not the sounds a man sorts. A man listens for the soft footstep of someone coming for his boots. You listen for a footstep on the kitchen side of the wall, where no man has a reason to be, and you have already decided what each ordinary noise is so that an extraordinary one will announce itself by contrast. The chimney tick, that is the brick cooling. The scrape, that is the iron pot Mary has left to soak. The long, settling groan, that is the house itself, green lumber still drying out a year after it was nailed up. complaining about the weather the way the whole camp complains about the weather. A man named Cobb, the one who priced you at the counter, is upstairs in the men's room where he belongs, and you know this because Mary made sure of it, and yet you keep one corner of your attention trained on the kitchen side floorboards anyway, because trust is a thing you extend by daylight and withdraw at night as a matter of routine. This is not fear, exactly. Fear is loud and brief. This is the other thing, the quiet, permanent thing, the quiet, patient, and watchful vigilance that a woman alone carries the way she carries her own pulse, not as an emergency, just as a condition. Adeline sleeps somewhere in the kitchen on a cot, by arrangement, because Adeline is dying slowly and Mary will not put a sick woman upstairs with the men, and her cough comes through the wall at intervals, dry and patient. You find, to your own surprise, that the cough is a comfort. It means another woman is 12 feet away on the same side of the only door that matters. Out here, that is what passes for company, a stranger's illness, audible through a wall, confirming you are not entirely the only one. You do not sleep so much as you stand down by degrees. The vigilance does not switch off. It just lowers, notch by notch, as the house settles and the candle dark holds and nobody comes. Somewhere past 1, the lowest notch arrives, the one that is almost sleep, where you are still listening but no longer awake enough to know it. The island holds. The tide stays out. The boots, in this story, were never the point. You wake, sometime after 10, to a dispute being conducted through your ceiling. It is not a loud dispute. It is the muffled, escalating, two men trying to stay quiet kind, which is somehow more legible than shouting, because you can hear the exact moment each man decides he is not going to back down. A bed slot, you gather. A night shift man has come in to claim the bed, a day shift man has not yet vacated, and the day shift man, who paid his 50 cents and intends to get his full measure of it, has declined to move. This is the central drama of the men's floor, the friction at the heart of hot bunking, and you have a front row seat to the audio. The bed is a business that runs in shifts, and like any business that overbooks, it occasionally seats 2 customers in one chair. The men have no recourse to a manager, because the manager is asleep behind a chimney 1 floor down. Except, and this is the part you are about to learn, the manager is never quite asleep. You hear Mary before you hear the dowel. You hear her on the stairs, which she takes at a pace that is unhurried in a way that is itself a kind of authority, the pace of a woman who knows the dispute will keep until she arrives, and that her arrival will end it. You have not seen the dowel. You will piece it together over the following minutes and confirm it in daylight. A short, smooth length of wood she keeps behind the kitchen door, worn pale at one end from use, kept for exactly this and nothing else. There is one sound, a single sharp crack of wood against the iron bed frame, not against any man, because Mary Murphy does not strike men, she strikes the furniture they are arguing over, which is louder than a slap and carries no charge of assault and communicates, with total economy, that the proprietress is now present and the discussion is concluded. The crack goes through the whole house. 40 men feel it in their teeth. Behind the chimney, you feel it too, and you understand in that instant the entire architecture of how a lone woman runs a house of 40 men, which is that she never fights the men, she removes the thing they are fighting about, and she does it with a stick and a voice and a reputation for meaning it. The night shift man says something. Mary says something shorter. The day shift man, you gather, is now vertical and pulling on his boots, because the next thing you hear is the heavy, resigned, 2-footed thump of a man who has lost an argument with a woman holding a dowel and has decided to lose it gracefully. The bed changes hands. The house exhales. Mary's tread goes back down the stairs at the same unhurried pace, and you hear her settle the dowel back into its place behind the door with a small wooden knock that is, in its way, a period at the end of a sentence. You lie there in the dark and revise your estimate of the woman who took your $2. You had read her at the counter as thorough and unmoved, a customs officer of a person. You now understand that the thoroughness is load-bearing, that a house like this does not run on locks, it runs on the certainty that the keeper will descend the stairs and crack the frame every single time, with the same flat patience, until the certainty itself does most of the work and the dowel becomes mostly ceremonial, almost, not entirely. She keeps it sharp the way a person keeps a promise. The house resettles into its 40-throated quiet. You think before you drift back down. That woman has done that 900 times, and she will do it 900 more. And somewhere in the doing of it is the reason a schoolteacher can sleep behind a chimney in a silver camp at all. You did not just rent a bolt, you rented her. You wake before the bell because something is moving in your hair, and unlike the bedbugs, which keep to the mattress, this one has come with you. You lie still for a moment, and confirm it by the specific, small sensation no one forgets once they have learned it. A minute, deliberate progress along the scalp near the part, and then you sit up in the dark and accept the morning's first piece of business, which is that you too have lice, because everyone in this building has lice, because lice do not read contracts either. For a man, the lice inventory is a brisk affair. The men upstairs crop their hair short and run 2 fingers along the seams of their shirts and are done in a minute. For you, it is a project, because your hair is long, because long hair is part of the respectability you are paid to embody, and because a louse in long hair is a louse with a great deal of territory to defend. You cannot crop it. A schoolteacher with a shorn head is a schoolteacher with a story attached, and you cannot afford a story. So you keep the hair, and the hair keeps the lice, and the two of you have entered a relationship you did not consent to and cannot easily leave. You take the fine-tooth comb from your trunk, the bone one, the good one, the one item of grooming you packed as a tool rather than a vanity, and you begin, by the grey light leaking under the door, the slow, methodical pass that women have done by every kind of dawn light for the whole of human history. Part, draw the comb, examine the teeth, wipe, part again. It is tedious, intimate, and faintly hopeless, and it is also one of the few things in this house you can actually accomplish through effort, which gives it a strange satisfaction the men's brisk version lacks. You find them. Of course you find them. You find the small hard bodies the comb drags free, and you press each one against the floorboard with a thumbnail in the unceremonious way that becomes, within a week, simply how you start a day. There is no horror in it after the first one. There is only the work of it, the same way there is only the work of sweeping a floor that will be dirty again by noon. Adeline, in the kitchen, combs hers out over a square of dark cloth so she can see what falls, and she does it without expression, the way she does everything, conserving for her cough the energy that other women spend on dismay. You will adopt her method by your second morning. The dark cloth is genuinely better. It is the kind of practical wisdom that gets handed woman to woman in places like this, never written down, learned by watching, worth more than anything in your 41 books on this particular subject. By the time the grey light has gone from a leak to a glow, you have made your pass and pinned your hair back up into the shape the day requires, the shape that says teacher, that says respectable, that says nothing whatsoever about the half hour you just spent with a bone comb and a thumbnail. This is the quiet labour underneath the respectability, the work of looking like a woman to whom none of this is happening, performed daily, before dawn, by lamplight, and then erased completely the moment you open the door. The men get to look tired. You do not get to look like anything but composed. You pin the last pin, you smooth the front, and you become, by an act of pure will and a bone comb, the schoolteacher the camp expects to see. There is, in the corner of your 6x8 room, a chamber pot, and it is the single most important object Mary gave you, and you understood its importance the moment you saw it, because the alternative to a chamber pot in this building is the outhouse, and the outhouse is the part of this arrangement that was very clearly designed by men, for men, with no thought spared for anyone else. The outhouse serves 40 people from a single pit at the back of the lot. You have seen it by daylight, a single-wall plank structure with a crescent cut in the door, a bent wire latch, and a queue. The men line up at dawn with their suspenders half buckled and conduct the business of the morning with a casualness born of having nothing to protect and no one watching who matters. For a man, the outhouse is an inconvenience. For you, it is a gauntlet, a walk across an open lot, past the waking men, to a structure with a wire latch you do not trust, to sit in a place with no real privacy and a smell that has developed, over months of 40-person use, what can only be called a personality. So the chamber pot. It lets you avoid the night entirely, which is the dangerous part. A woman crossing a dark lot alone to a latched box is a woman who has subtracted every protection she spent the night assembling. The pot keeps you behind the bolt until full daylight, and full daylight, with Mary up and the camp visible, is when the lot is as safe as it gets. The pot is not dignified. Dignity is not on offer here. The pot is strategic, practical, and entirely unsentimental, and strategy is what you have instead of dignity. And then there is the emptying of it, which is its own small humiliation managed with its own small protocol. You do it yourself, early, before the men are about, carrying it across the lot to the pit with the brisk, neutral expression of a woman who has decided that the way to survive an indignity is to perform it as though it were a clerical task. Clara, Mary's 12-year-old daughter, does the same for the house's pots with a face so practiced in neutrality that you suspect she learnt it before she learned her letters, which she has not entirely learned, which is a thing you notice and file and will return to. The deeper problem, the one nobody in the building says aloud, is that the outhouse and the well are old enemies sharing a small yard. The pit sits at the back of the lot. The well sits at the front. Between them is perhaps 50 feet of the same tamped earth, and the two of them are conducting, through that earth, a slow conversation that nobody has the science yet to translate, though the typhoid that will move through camps like this is one of its eventual sentences. You do not know this. Nobody knows this. You only know the chamber pot keeps you off the lot at night, and that is reason enough to love it. You set the pot back in its corner, behind a cloth, and you wash your hands in the tin cup of covered pale water Mary gave you, using the small, hard sliver of soap from your trunk, because you have learned that the open basin in the hall is a thing to be used last and trusted least. The whole sequence, the pot, the lot at dawn, the covered water, the sliver of soap, is a system you have built in a single night out of instinct and Adeline's few words, and it is the kind of system every woman out here builds alone, and assumes she is the only one who has thought of it, when in fact 1,000 women in 1,000 camps have built the identical thing, in silence, and handed it down by example to the next one off the stage. The bell will ring at 5, and you intend to be dressed and composed and seated before it does, because the worst possible way to enter a room of 40 men is late and disordered, and the best is early and finished, already in your place, already armoured, before the audience has fully assembled. So you begin in the dark, by the light of the candle stub and the grey under the door, the long daily reconstruction of a respectable woman from the loosened, slept-in, louse-combed materials of the night. The corset first, properly this time. You retighten the 2 laces you let out, drawing them snug with the over-the-shoulder pull that takes a strength people who have never done it do not suspect, and the architecture goes back up, rib by rib, until you are once again held, tightened, and corseted into the shape the era requires of you. There is a grim joke in it that you are too tired to enjoy. The garment that made the night nearly unsurvivable is the same garment that makes the day possible, because the day requires a silhouette and the silhouette requires the cage. You lace yourself back into the cage. You always lace yourself back into the cage. Then the dress, the good one, the one that travelled folded at the top of the trunk specifically so it would be the one you wore on a first morning. You shake it out. It has the creases of the journey in it, and you smooth them with your palms the way you'll later smooth them with an iron if there is ever an iron, and you button it from the bottom with cold fingers in the cold room. Each button, a small declaration that the woman who slept here in a fortress of furniture is not the woman who is about to walk out the door. That woman is going to be the schoolteacher. This is where you build her. The hair you already pinned. You check it by feel, find the pins holding, tuck the one strand that has worked loose. You have no mirror. The mirror is in the trunk, wrapped, and you have not unwrapped it, because a mirror is the kind of thing that breaks on a stage road, and a broken mirror is bad luck you cannot afford, and 7 years you do not have. You dress by feel and by discipline, which is how you will dress most mornings of your teaching life, and you become competent at it the way you become competent at everything out here, which is by having no alternative. There is a moment near the end when you are mostly assembled and not yet public, when you sit on the edge of the cold bed in the cold room and simply are, for the space of one held breath, neither the woman of the night nor the woman of the day, just a tired person of 22 behind a chimney in a town she reached yesterday, a long way from wherever the letter came from, doing the only thing the world will pay her to do. The moment is not self-pity. It is too brief and too practical for that. It is more like the pause a soldier takes before standing up, the last private second before the roll resumes. Then it passes, because the bell is close and the roll is the point. You stand. You settle the dress. You square the front of yourself the way you'll square the front of a classroom. You lift the chair from under the doorknob and set it quietly aside. You slide the trunk back from the door, and you put your hand on the bolt, the $2 bolt, the receipt, the island's one gate, and you hold it there for a second before you draw it, because once it is drawn, you are no longer alone, and no longer safe in the small, certain way you have been all night, and a woman learns to mark that threshold even when she has no time to honour it. You draw the bolt. The night is over. You go to meet the 40 men. The bell rings at 5, an actual hand bell, swung twice by Mary at the foot of the stairs, and you time your entrance to it precisely, because you have learned that the way to walk into a room of 40 men is to already be walking when they notice you, never to appear in a doorway and pause, because a pause invites the room to look, and a room of 40 men looking at one woman is a weather system you do not wish to stand under any longer than the laws of motion require. So you come out of the kitchen passage at a steady, unhesitating pace, eyes level, hands quiet, and you cross to the place Mary has indicated for you, the end of the long table, nearest the kitchen, where Adeline also sits, the women's end, established by no rule anyone wrote, but enforced by the same gravity that arranges everything in this house. The room registers you. You feel it the way you feel, a draft, a shift in the air, a fractional drop in the volume of talk, approximately 40 faces performing the frontier courtesy of not quite looking while looking. You do not acknowledge it. Acknowledging it is how you lose. The table is a plank on sawhorses, and it seats a dozen at a sitting, shoulder to shoulder, and the men eat against a shift clock with the focused haste of people for whom breakfast is a refueling and not a meal. You take your place at the end. You are the only woman at the table who is not being paid to cook for it. Adeline beside you is a boarder like yourself, dying slowly and treated gently, and across the way Clara hauls the coffee with her 12-year-old's gravity, and Mary moves between stove and table like the weather itself. 4 women in the room. One of them is you, and you are the anomaly, the unattached, respectable woman, the schoolteacher, the thing this town has too few of and does not quite know how to seat. A man directly across from you, a big calm fellow with a sandy beard and the forearms of a driller, says good morning, and means nothing by it but courtesy, and you return it in the exact measured register you have rehearsed for 10 years without knowing you were rehearsing it. Warm enough to be civil, cool enough to be no invitation, the precise tone of a woman who has answered 10,000 good mornings and intends every one of them to be the end of the conversation rather than the start of one. He nods and returns to his beans. That is how it is supposed to go. That is the register working. It does not always work, and you know it won't. And somewhere down the table a younger man is already watching you with the particular look you have learned to read at a distance, the look of a man doing arithmetic about a woman, the look that precedes, by a day or a week, the conversation you do not want to have. You file his face. You have a long mental ledger of faces, kept the way Mary keeps her written one, and his goes in the column for later. For now you eat, because the food will not wait, and the men will not slow, and the whole performance of being the schoolteacher at the table runs on appearing to be perfectly at ease in a situation that requires every ounce of your composure to survive. You are the only woman in the building who paid to be here, and you are sitting in a room full of men who would each, in his own way, like that to mean something, and you are managing all of it with a level gaze and a steady hand and a good morning calibrated to 2 decimal places. Nobody watching would guess the effort. That, precisely, is the effort. Clara comes around the table with the coffee, and you watch her do it, because Clara is 12 and is performing a task that has clearly been hers since before she was tall enough to do it safely, and there is something in the way she carries the heavy iron pot, 2-handed, braced against her hip, face set with the gravity of a much older person, that goes into you and stays there. She fills the men's cups without being asked and without making eye contact, sets the pot down at the end of the table with a small controlled thud that means she is finished, and goes back to the kitchen where the next pot is already heating. She has, you suspect, never once been thanked, and would not know what to do if she were. The coffee itself is the same coffee the whole frontier drinks, which is to say it is barely coffee. It was brewed in that iron pot sometime before 4 in the morning, and it has been reheated on the back of the stove ever since, and it will be reheated several more times before the pot is finally scraped out at noon. The grounds are still in it, because there is no filter, because a filter is a refinement that this establishment has never been asked to provide. The bottom third of any cup is sediment. The top 2/3 is a dark, bitter and faintly metallic liquid that tastes the way a boiled nail would taste if someone had charged you a nickel for it. You drink it anyway, the way everyone drinks it, because the alternative is the water, and you have already decided about the water. You hold the tin cup by the rim with 2 fingers because the handle conducts heat at a rate designed to keep a person honest, and you take it in measured swallows, stopping well above the sediment line, because a schoolteacher does not drink the grounds, and a schoolteacher especially does not drink the grounds, while a younger man at the far end of the table is watching to see what kind of woman she is. There is a skill to the cup that you possess, and the newer men do not, which is knowing exactly when to stop. Drink too deep and you get the paste, the dark, patient sludge that coats the tin and your teeth and your resolve. Stop too shy, and you waste what little warmth the cup was offering. The correct depth is learned, and you learned it years ago in other dining rooms in other towns, and you apply it now without thinking, which is itself a small tell that you are not as new to all of this as your fresh dress suggests. Mary keeps the covered pail for the women in the kitchen, you have noticed, and the open pail for the men's coffee and the men's basin, and you understand this is not an accident. It is a hierarchy of water expressed in lids. The covered water is cleaner. The covered water goes to Mary, to Clara, to Adeline, to you, to the cooking. The open water, drawn from the same well but left to receive whatever the room sheds into it across a day, goes to the 40. It is the one preference Mary extends to her own sex without ever announcing it, a small lidded act of solidarity conducted in plain sight and noticed by no one who isn't looking for it. You are looking for it. You file it next to the dowel. Clara passes again, collecting cups, and on her second circuit she glances at you, quickly, sidelong, the look of a child appraising an unfamiliar adult, and you hold her glance for the half-second it lasts, and you do not smile, because a smile would be too much, and Clara is not a child who trusts too much, but you let your face be open, which is a different and rarer offering, and Clara, you think, registers it. She goes back to the kitchen. The pot heats. You will think about Clara a great deal more before this is over, because Clara is the whole question of this town, wearing a 12-year-old's apron, and you, of all the people at this table, are the one whose job it is to answer her. The food arrives the way everything arrives in this house, which is all at once, in shared vessels, with no ceremony and no menu, because there is no menu. There has never been a menu. There is only the food, which is the same food it was yesterday and will be tomorrow. Salt pork that has been in the pan since before 4 and is somehow both scorched and underdone, the two conditions coexisting in defiance of the principles of heat. A dense, yellow and faintly resigned wedge of cornbread, heavy enough to drive a nail. Beans, soaked overnight, which is the single most forward-thinking act this kitchen performs. Reheated and serviceable and, by the low standard of the table, genuinely good. You serve yourself from the central dish at the women's end, and you do it the way you do everything at this table, which is quickly and without appearing to calculate, while in fact calculating constantly. The dish is finite. The men reach into it at the rate hungry men reach into a finite dish, and the etiquette, never spoken, is that the slowest eater gets the least, and you have no intention of being either the slowest eater or the woman who is seen to grab. So you take your portion in one clean, unhurried motion, enough and not more, and you withdraw your hand before the reaching becomes a competition, and you eat at the measured pace of a person who is not in a hurry and is in fact in a considerable hurry. The cornbread, as in every account of every table like this, is mostly a structural element. It is not so much food as a platform for food. A dense yellow foundation that absorbs the bean liquid and the pork grease and holds the meal together in your stomach until the middle of the day, at which point its further career becomes your own private concern. It is not sweet. There is no sugar to spare for sweetness. It is cornmeal and water and heat pressed into a shape that qualifies as bread only under the generous frontier definition, where bread means anything that was once batter and is now not. Across from you, the sandy-bearded driller eats his beans without looking at them, delivering each spoonful with a face that does not participate in the transaction, which is the correct technique and a sign of long residence. Beside you, Adeline eats slowly and little, because the cough has taken her appetite the way it is taking everything else, by increment, politely, and you notice she pushes the better portions of her share toward the center when she thinks no one is watching, as if returning what she cannot use to a pool she still feels part of. You watch this and say nothing, because saying something would be unkind, and you understand that the only dignity available to Adeline at this table is the dignity of being treated as though she is fine. You are aware, the entire time, of being watched, not hostilely, just constantly, the low ambient attention that a single respectable woman draws in a room calibrated for men. You manage it the way you manage the coffee depth and the portion size, by technique, by giving the room nothing irregular to fix on, by being so precisely unremarkable in your conduct that the watching finds no purchase and slowly, over many mornings, subsides into habit. A woman becomes invisible in a place like this not by hiding but by being perfectly, reliably, boringly correct until the novelty wears off and the room stops seeing her. That is the goal. You are weeks of correctness away from it. This is morning one. The meal takes approximately 11 minutes, because Mary begins clearing at 11 minutes, regardless of where anyone is in the process, arriving with a rag in one hand and her intentions in the other, and the table empties the way a river clears a sandbar, not by force but by the certainty of the current. You finish before she reaches your end, because you always finish before she reaches your end, because finishing on time is one more line in the long unwritten contract of being the kind of woman this town has no complaint to lodge against. You stand, you step back, the bench clears behind you. Another morning at the table is survived, and survived is the operative verb. It comes on the third morning, though it could have come on the first, and it comes from the younger man whose face you filed on day one, the one doing arithmetic, and it comes the way these things come out here, which is abruptly, sincerely, and without any of the preliminary acquaintance that the word courtship is supposed to imply. He waits until the table has mostly cleared. He turns his hat in his hands the way a man turns his hat when he has rehearsed something and is about to deliver it badly anyway. And he asks you to marry him, across the wreckage of the salt pork, before he has reliably learned your name. You have been proposed to before. Any unmarried woman who has come this far west has been proposed to before, because the arithmetic of the place produces proposals the way the kitchen produces cornbread, steadily, without much refinement, as a basic structural output of the conditions. The West is a country of men who outnumber women by margins that turn an ordinary woman into a rare one, and a respectable young schoolteacher into something close to an event. He is not in love with you. He cannot be. He does not know you. He is in love with the possibility of you, with the idea of a wife in a town that has almost none, and he has decided, on the evidence of 3 breakfasts, that the possibility is worth a hat-twisting gamble over the beans. His name is Pruitt. He is not a bad man. That is the thing the storybooks never tell you about the frontier proposal, that the man is so often perfectly decent, hopeful, lonely, and sincere, which makes the declining of him a harder and sadder act than declining a scoundrel would be. He has a claim, he tells you, and 40 acres he is proving up, and he would treat you well, and you believe all of it, and none of it changes the arithmetic on your side, which is the arithmetic he cannot see. Because here is what Pruitt does not know, turning his hat. The very thing that makes you worth proposing to is the thing his proposal would destroy. You are the schoolteacher. You are respectable, unattached, educated here, and the contract folded in your glove ends the day you become a wife. To say yes to Pruitt is to stop being the woman Pruitt is proposing to. The job that brought you, that pays you 1/3 of a man's wage but pays you, that makes you a person in your own right in a town that barely has a category for one, that job dissolves at the altar. He is offering you 40 acres in exchange for the only thing you have that is entirely your own. So you decline him, and you do it the way you have learned to do it, which is gently and completely and without leaving a wound that will fester into a grudge, because a declined man with a grudge is a danger to exactly the reputation you spend every night and morning defending. You thank him for the honor which is real. You tell him you are not free to marry, which is true in a way he will hear as personal and you mean as legal. You let him keep his dignity, because his dignity costs you nothing, and a man's wounded dignity in a small camp can cost you a great deal. He nods. He puts the hat back on. He goes to his shift, and he will be civil to you for the rest of your time here, and that civility is the dividend of having declined him correctly. You sit for a moment after he has gone, alone at the cleared end of the table. Then you fold the feeling up small, the way you fold the contract, along its established creases, and you put it away, and you go to open the schoolhouse, because the children do not know about any of this, and the children are, in the end, the entire point. Mary does you a kindness on the wash basin that she would not announce, and you would not thank her for aloud, because to name it would be to make it a transaction, and the kindness lies precisely in its not being one. She lets you go first. The basin in the hall is a tin pan filled once at first light from the covered pail, and it serves the whole house in sequence without being emptied, and where you fall in that sequence is the entire difference between washing and merely participating in the water. Mary arranges, by means no more visible than a glance and a tilt of her head, for you to fall first. First is everything. First is clear water with a clean surface, water that has received nothing yet but the morning, water you can actually put your face into rather than merely beside. By the 7th user, the basin has a film, soap, skin, dust, hair, and by the 12th, it has stopped being water in any meaningful sense and become a collaborative project, a small, grey, and disappointing pond that a man dips his hands into out of ritual rather than hope. The men sort themselves into that sequence by a hierarchy of seniority and force. You are placed, quietly, ahead of all of it. It is the second small-lidded act of solidarity, after the covered pail, and you receive it in the spirit it is given, which is silence. You wash quickly and you wash thoroughly, because first water is a resource, and you do not waste a resource, and because the hall is not private, and a woman washing in a not private hall does it with economy. Face, neck, hands, the back of the neck under the pinned hair. You use your own soap, the hard sliver from the trunk, not the communal block, because the communal block has a shape now, and the shape is the palmar history of everyone who has touched it, and you would rather not add your own to the record. The whole wash takes 90 seconds and leaves you cleaner than you will be again until tomorrow's first water. Then the towel, which is its own institution, and not a good one. There is one towel. It hangs from a nail on a length of rope, and it was once white, and it has been used by every man who came before the wash got to you on every prior morning, and it will be washed on Sunday if Mary has time after the bread. The men call it the rag, or the grey, or, when they are being precise, the situation. To use it is to press to your clean face the accumulated mornings of 40 strangers, which rather undoes the 90 seconds of soap, and so you do what you have done in every house like this. You carry your own small square of linen in your sleeve, and you dry on that, and you let the grey towel hang there, performing its ceremonial role for the men who have made their peace with it. Adeline dries on her own linen too. Clara, you notice, uses the grey towel, because Clara is of the house and not a guest, and the small economies of the guest are not available to the daughter, and this is one more thing you file in the growing ledger of what it costs to be Clara, who hauls the coffee and empties the pots and dries her 12-year-old face on the situation, because that is what the daughter of the house does. You will, before you leave, find a way to give Clara a square of clean linen of her own, quietly, as a thing that fell out of your trunk rather than a thing you offered, because Clara will not accept a gift, but might accept an accident. The basin sits on its stand, used once now, by you, the water still nearly clear, waiting for the next in the sequence. Behind you the morning assembles itself, the men queuing for their turn at the declining water, the day starting its slow machine. You have washed first and dried clean, and you carry that small advantage out into the day the way you carry every advantage out here, quietly, gratefully, and with a clear understanding of exactly how it was arranged, and exactly how little it would take to lose it. You will not be in this town long enough to feel what the food does to you, but Adeline has been and the men have been, and you read the slow damage in them the way you read weather in a sky. There are no fresh vegetables. There have been no fresh vegetables since the last wagon out of the lower valleys, and the next ones are days or weeks away over roads that turn produce to compost before it arrives. You eat what does not spoil, potatoes when there are potatoes, turnips when there are not. And underneath the monotony, quiet and patient and unnamed, the deficiency builds. It announces itself first in the gums. Adeline's bleed when she bites the cornbread, and she has stopped remarking on it, and a long-term boarder named Hollis has a looseness in his back teeth that he attributes to a mining accident, and that is in fact the early arithmetic of scurvy, the slow unstitching that comes from a diet with no green in it for months. Nobody at the table has the word. The word exists, in journals, in cities, but it has not finished its journey to a plank table in a Colorado silver camp, and so the men attribute the fatigue and the bleeding and the stiff mornings to the altitude, the shift, the workload, the personal failings of whoever runs the kitchen, to everything except the only thing, which is the food, which has always been like this and therefore cannot, in the logic of the table, be the cause. Mary knows. Mary has seen it before. in long-term residence, and she does the one thing within her power and her margin, which is to offer, for an extra 10 cents on the weekly rate, a small dish of canned tomatoes on Wednesdays. The tomatoes help. Not cure, help. They slow the bleeding gums by a degree that the men can feel and cannot explain, and so the Wednesday tomato becomes a small coveted thing, eaten slowly, the one item on the table that is neither beige nor structural, the colour of something a person chose on purpose. And here is the trap inside the remedy, the one nobody can see. The tomatoes come in a can, and the can is sealed with lead solder along its seam, and the lead dissolves slowly into the acid of the fruit over the months the can sits on the general store shelf, and so the very dish that slows the scurvy is, at the same time, by the same mouthful, depositing a different and slower poison into the people it is helping. The lead does its quiet work, the trembling hands a man cannot place, the headache that does not answer to whiskey, the dull, persistent fatigue read as hard living. The cure and the poison arrive in the same tin, sealed by the same solder, and nobody in 1879 can tell them apart, because the knowledge to tell them apart does not yet exist. You eat the Wednesday tomato when it comes, and you taste the faint metallic note under the sweetness, and you do not know what it is either, though you note that your teeth feel briefly odd afterward, and you decide, as everyone decides, that it is nothing. It is, in fact, something. It will go on being something in the bodies of the people who stay here long after you have boarded round to your next family, the men accumulating their slow tremor and their unexplained headaches, attributing all of it to the work, none of it to the can sitting upright on the shelf with its flush, untroubled seam, looking exactly as innocent as a thing that is poisoning you patiently and at no extra charge always looks. The mercy of your situation is that you are leaving. You will board a month here, a month there, eating off many tables, and no single table will have you long enough to write its full signature into your body. The men who stay are not so lucky. Hollis will still be here, and his teeth will be looser, and his hands will have begun their tremor, and he will still be calling it the altitude, because the altitude does not require him to believe that the food he is grateful for is the thing taking him apart. A real bath. Not the 90 seconds at the basin, but an actual immersion, a thing your whole tired body has been negotiating for since the stage, requires leaving the boarding house entirely and walking to the bathhouse on the main street, and it costs 25 cents, sometimes 50, which for a schoolteacher earning a third of a man's wage is a sum you weigh before you spend. You weigh it, and you spend it, on a Saturday. Because the week's accumulation has crossed the line from personal to socially consequential, and a schoolteacher who has crossed that line is a schoolteacher the school board hears about. The bathhouse, like everything else in this town, was built for men, and the experience of the men is the one it is designed around. A wooden tub behind a curtain, topped up rather than emptied between customers, so that each man lowers himself into a warm, grey, and charitable approximation of fresh water that has already received the 4 men before him. The water is changed when it becomes structurally indefensible, and not before. For the men this is simply the deal. For you it would be unthinkable, and the bathhouse knows it, and so the bathhouse offers, for those who ask and those who can pay, the thing that makes the whole proposition survivable for a woman, which is the ladies' hour. The ladies' hour is early, before the men's trade begins, and it buys you the one thing the men never get and never think to want, which is the first water, a tub drawn fresh, clear, and hot, that no one has been in before you. The attendant, a stolid woman named Mrs. Pell, who runs the early hours while her husband sleeps off the late ones, fills it from the kettle and pulls the curtain and gives you your 20 minutes and asks you nothing, which is its own service. For the length of those 20 minutes you are alone, immersed, unwatched, and clean in a way you have not been since the journey began, and the relief of it is so total that you understand exactly why a woman would pay the premium and walk the distance and rise early to claim it. You bring your own soap and your own linen, as always, and you wash the whole week out of your hair, the lice and the lamp smoke and the road, and you sit in the clear, hot water in the grey morning light, and you let your ribs, freed for 20 minutes from the corset, expand to their full unfashionable circumference. There is a thought you allow yourself only here, in the one private warm place the town affords, which is that you are tired in a way that goes deeper than sleep, and that the tiredness is not the work but the watchfulness, the unbroken low vigilance of being a woman alone among men, and that the bath is the only place you ever fully set it down, The clean dress is folded on the bench, brought specifically for the dry side moment, the brief, genuine cleanliness that exists between the tub and the rest of the week. You put it on over a body that is, for the space of a few hours, actually clean, and you walk back toward the boarding house through a street that smells of horses and ore and proximity, and you feel the cleanliness begin its slow negotiation with the town almost immediately. And you know the town will win, because the town always wins. But for now, this morning, you are ahead. Mrs. Pell, locking up the ladies' hour behind you, will spend the rest of the day running the men's trade, the topped-up tub, the grey water, the queue out the door. She is, in her way, another of the women who make the town survivable for women. The ladies' hour is her invention and her labour, an hour carved out of her own short sleep so that the few respectable women in camp have somewhere to be clean. You pay her the extra nickel without being asked, and she takes it without comment, and the whole transaction is one more of the small solidarities, conducted in coin and silence, that hold the women of this place to one another beneath the notice of the men they all, in their separate ways, serve. You hand your bundle to the laundry on Thursday, the same as the men do, and the laundry is run by a Chinese family whom the boarding house ledger records under a single convenient surname that is not actually anyone's name, and who charge a few cents a garment and return everything on Tuesday, pressed and folded and smelling of hot linen and lye, briefly, perfectly clean. By 1880, there are something like 7,500 Chinese laundries across the American West, an entire industry built out of the one trade the camps could not organize themselves to do and would not let the people who did it do anything else. You bring your shirts and your good collar. You collect them Tuesday. The folds are precise enough to make your closet behind the chimney feel, for an afternoon, like a place a person chose. But there is a second bundle, smaller, that you do not hand to the laundry, that you hand to no one, that you wash yourself in the grey dawn with the door bolted and the chair wedged and the covered pail water in the basin, and it is the bundle the storybooks have never once mentioned, and the histories mostly decline to, which is the matter of a woman's body keeping its own calendar, regardless of where the stage has left her. The rags are washable, because there is no other kind. They are rinsed and wrung and dried in secret, draped over the trunk inside the locked room where no one will see them, taken down and folded away before you draw the bolt, because a woman manages this the way she manages everything out here, which is privately, resourcefully, and as though it were not happening at all. There is no shop for it. There is no aisle, no tin, no patent remedy that solves the actual logistics, only the rags and the rinsing and the discretion, repeated month after month in every camp and wagon and boarding house from the Missouri to the coast, by every woman on the frontier, in total silence, each one assuming she is improvising a solution that women have in fact been quietly handing down since long before there was a frontier to improvise it on. It is labour. It is constant, invisible, unpaid, unmentioned labour, and it runs underneath everything else a woman does out here like a second shift. Nobody acknowledges she is working. The difficulty is the privacy, which this building does not naturally provide, and which your $2 bolt, it turns out, was purchased to provide twice over. The bolt that keeps out cob also keeps in the small domestic operation of drying rags over a trunk. The same door does both jobs. A woman named Lan runs the family laundry with her husband, and you have spoken to her only in the few words the transaction requires, and yet you have noticed that she runs the press and keeps the accounts and manages the heat with exactly the competence Mary runs the boarding house, and that the town that depends on her labour extends her none of the small protections it extends to you. Her respectability does not buy her a lady's hour or a covered pail or a place at any table on the main street. You file this uneasily, because it complicates the comfort of the small solidarities. The lids and the first water and the carved-out hour are real, but they are not extended to every woman, and the line they stop at is not a line anyone will admit to having drawn. You collect your pressed shirts. You wash your secret bundle yourself. The two laundries, the public one of collars and the private one of rags, run side by side through your week, one acknowledged and one not, and you keep them both going without comment, because that is the work, and the work does not stop because no one will speak of it. There is a board behind Mary Murphy's counter with the house rules painted on it, and you read it on your first morning the way you read everything, carefully, because a board of rules tells you who a place thinks it is. No drinking inside. No firearms above the ground floor. No fighting in the dining room. and then the line that stops you, because it appears to exclude you from the building you are standing in. No women on the premises, except Mrs. Murphy and her daughter. You puzzle it for a moment before you understand it, and the understanding rearranges your whole sense of where you are sleeping. The rule is not about women like you. The rule is about the men. It exists to keep the men from bringing women up the stairs, to keep the establishment, in the language of the day, respectable, which in a mining camp is a commercial designation as much as a moral one. The difference between a boarding house and the other kind of house, a difference Mary enforces because her entire livelihood depends on the camp's mothers and church and school board believing in it. The board does not forbid the schoolteacher. The board exists, in part, to make a place where the schoolteacher can safely be. And you are the exception that proves the policy. You are not on the premises in the way the rule means. You are behind the chimney in Mary's own domain, on the women's side of the only door that locks, taken in under the keeper's personal protection as a thing entirely separate from the renting of slots to men. Mary did not bend her rule to house you. She built her rule, in part, so that housing you would be possible. The no women rule and the schoolteacher behind the chimney are the same policy seen from two ends, one a wall against disorder, the other a small protected room the wall makes room for. The rules are enforced personally and identically every time, which you have already heard demonstrated through the floor with a dowel, and which the men have learned to treat as weather, not negotiable, not personal, simply the conditions under which the house exists. A man named Cord, the legend of the house goes, tested the firearms rule on his second night, carried his pistol up the stairs, and came down to find his slot reassigned and his belongings stacked on the porch, and Mary never said a word to him, because she did not need to, because the stacked belongings said it. He stood on the porch for 11 minutes and then walked away. The rule held. The rule always holds. You come to see the board not as a list of prohibitions, but as the load-bearing structure of your own safety, every line of it doing quiet work on your behalf. No firearms above the ground floor means the room above you holds no loaded guns. No fighting in the dining room means the table you eat at is, by decree and dowel, a place where the violence of the camp is required to pause. No drinking inside means the men come to their bunks sober enough to be predictable, and predictable, in a building full of strangers, is the whole of what a woman needs them to be. The rules that look like a keeper's fussiness are, read correctly, a fortress built one painted line at a time. Mary, you understand by now, is not a kind woman in the soft sense and would be insulted to be called one. She is something more useful, which is a consistent one, a woman who has decided what her house is and enforces that decision the same way 900 times, so that the certainty does the work the dowel only finishes. And inside that certainty, almost incidentally, a schoolteacher off the evening stage can bolt a door and dry her rags and comb her hair and sleep, as safe as the frontier permits anyone to be, which is not entirely safe, but is, behind Mary's board, Mary's bolt and Mary's flat, unanswerable and daily consistency, as close to it as this town has to offer. You see her on the Tuesday you collect your laundry, the cook from the establishment 3 blocks east, and you see her because she has come to Mary's back door on some errand between women that the front of the house does not transact, and the two of them speak briefly in the lot, and you understand from 20 feet away that you are watching a kind of commerce the town does not map. The woman is Chinese. She cannot rent a bed on the main street. She cannot sit at Mary's table or wash in Mary's basin or carve out a lady's hour at Mrs. Pell's bathhouse. 3 blocks east is a section the white directories decline to map, with a name the people inside it do not use for themselves, and it contains its own economy and its own lodging and its own rules, because the alternative the main street offered was nothing. The laundries are there, and the cook tents, and the herbalist, and a boarding establishment that runs parallel to Mary's on its own ledger for the men the front houses won't have, and the women who keep all of it running do the identical labour Mary does, the accounts, the heat, the management of difficult men, for none of the standing. By 1880 their laundries wash 1/3 to 1/2 of all the commercial linen in the West. The town could not function without them. The town has built itself, with some care, not to notice them. The cook gets the first water at no table, the covered pail from no one, the carved-out hour at no bathhouse. You get all 3 for the same work, and the only difference between you is the colour of the face the camp decided to count. You were born on the side it counts. She was not. That is the whole of it. The cook finishes her errand and goes back east, and Mary watches her go with a face that gives nothing away, and you cannot tell whether Mary sees the line the way you have just seen it or has simply lived inside it so long that it has become, like the weather, a condition rather than a choice. You suspect it is some of both. You suspect that Mary extends what small solidarities she can. The backdoor errand was one, within a boundary she did not draw and cannot dissolve, and that this is the most that most people manage most of the time, a few private decencies smuggled across a line they lack the power to erase. You collect your pressed shirts from Land's counter that afternoon, and you pay without haggling, and you meet her eye, and you say thank you in the plain way you would say it to anyone, which is a small thing and changes nothing structural and is, you have decided, still worth doing, because the line is not yours to erase, but the courtesy is yours to extend. And a courtesy extended across a line at least declines to pretend the line is just. The piano 2 doors down has not stopped since you arrived, and by your third night you have stopped hearing it as music and started hearing it as a feature of the building, the way you hear the chimney tick and the house settle, and it comes from the dance hall next to the saloon, and the dance hall is full of women, and the women are the ones your contract was written to keep you separate from. You are forbidden the saloon, the dance hall, the establishments where liquor is served. The painted line of the contract runs directly down the wall between your respectability and their trade, and you can hear them through it, laughing, working, getting through their own long night, 2 doors down and a whole social universe away. You think about them more than you would admit to the school board, because the more you understand your own situation, the harder it is not to see theirs as a version of it with the protections stripped off. They are women in a town built for men, earning what the town will pay a woman, which is to say, earning by being, in one way or another, what the men in a womanless place will pay for. You earn by teaching their letters. They earn 2 doors down. The difference between you is real, and the difference between you is also, you have come to understand, terrifyingly thin. A matter of category and luck and a letter about a schoolhouse. The same category that protects you from the cook 3 blocks east, drawing a different line, in a different direction, with you on the lucky side of it again. Because here is the part the storybooks leave out. The part that the word fallen is designed to obscure. A great many of those women did not choose the dance hall over teaching. They chose it over starving, in a country that offered a woman alone almost no way to eat that did not run through a man. You are 1 bad month, 1 failed school, 1 rumour, 1 wrongly declined proposal away from the same door. The contract that binds you so tightly is also, read from the dance hall, a kind of fortune. There is a woman named Belle, you have gathered, who is something between a manager and a queen of the place next door, and who is spoken of by the men with a mixture of appetite and respect, and who runs her house, by all accounts, with a competence not unlike Mary's, the same accounts, the same management of difficult men, the same flat, unanswerable, and hard-won authority. 2 women, 2 doors apart, running 2 houses full of men, divided by a painted line that says one of them is respectable and one is not, and doing, underneath the line, recognizably the same job. You have never met Belle and you never will, because the contract makes the meeting impossible, and yet you feel across the wall a kind of grim kinship with her that you could never voice, and that she would probably find amusing. You do not moralize about the dance hall. You have lost the standing to. You simply listen to the piano, badly played and unstoppable, and you let it be what it is, which is the sound of other women getting through the same night you are getting through, by the means the town left available to them, 2 doors down, on the wrong side of a line that you did not draw, and that keeps you, this month, this year, on the side with the bolt and the books. The piano finds its 8th bar, loses it, starts the 7 over. You close your eyes. Somewhere a woman 2 doors down closes hers. Adeline keeps a small brown glass bottle in her apron, and you know what it is before she tells you, because you have seen it in the apron of half the women you have ever travelled near, and it is laudanum, which is opium dissolved in alcohol, sold without a prescription at the general store for 15 cents the bottle, and it is the closest thing the frontier offers a tired woman to mercy. She takes it for the cough, and for the pain the cough leaves behind it, and for the longer thing underneath both that she would not have a name for and would not use if she did, which is simply the weight of being where she is, ill and far and alone, with a calendar running out. The general store shelf where the laudanum lives is a tidy, hopeful row of bottles, and a great many of them are the same thing wearing different labels, which is the genius and the quiet catastrophe of the patent medicine trade. There are soothing syrups for fractious infants, which are laudanum. There are nerve tonics and female complaint cordials marketed directly at women, promising relief from the whole vague catalogue of ailments the era filed under female weakness, and a good many of them are laudanum or laudanum with something stirred in, so the label has a second thing to say. A bottle called a cordial, a bottle called a compound, a bottle called a syrup. The names do more work than the medicine, and the names are aimed, with real precision, at women. It is women who buy most of it. The trade runs, to a degree the era does not examine and later eras will find startling, on the bodies of women. The overwhelming majority of the people quietly dependent on these legal bottles are women of every class and corner, because women are the ones managing pain that has no doctor, grief that has no outlet, a body that keeps its hard calendar in a country with no privacy and no help, and a 15-cent bottle that asks no questions and offers a few hours of not feeling is, for a great many of them, the only thing on the shelf that is actually for them. There is no judgment in this, only arithmetic. The bottle is cheaper than the doctor, lasts longer than the whiskey, and does not require a woman to explain herself to anyone. You do not carry one yet, and you note that yet with the honesty you try to bring to your own situation, because you can see the road to it clearly enough. You can see the nights the watchfulness will not switch off, the months the boarding round loneliness will pool in your chest, the eventual morning when 15 cents for a few hours of quiet will seem like the most reasonable purchase in the store. Adeline did not start with the bottle. Nobody starts with the bottle. The bottle is where the road goes when the road goes on long enough. And you are early on the road, and you watch Adeline take her careful evening measure, and you understand it completely, and you make no resolution about it either way, because resolutions are for people who do not yet know what the nights are like. Adeline takes her measure, and the cough eases and her face loosens by a degree you have learned to recognize, and she folds the bottle back into the apron and resumes her mending, and the two of you sit in the warm kitchen in the lamplight not talking, which is the form your friendship has taken, a friendship conducted almost entirely in shared silence, and the occasional sentence of hard-won practical advice. The chair, not just the bolt, the dark cloth for the comb, the careful evening measure that takes the edge off a night that has too many edges. She is teaching you, without meaning to, how a woman survives this country, and one of the lessons, the one neither of you will say aloud, is that survival sometimes comes in a 15-cent bottle and is not, for that, any less like survival. Adeline has consumption, which is the street name for the disease the doctors call phthisis and a later age will call tuberculosis, and you knew it the first night from the particular dry persistence of the cough and the small spotted handkerchief she folds away without comment, and the whole house knows it, and the whole house has arrived, without discussion, at the frontier's standard arrangement, with a dying boarder, which is to treat her with a quiet, careful, and unspoken gentleness, and to change absolutely nothing about the shared cup, the shared basin, the shared air. Nobody asks her to eat elsewhere. Nobody can spare the knowledge that they should. Germ theory exists, technically, in journals in European cities, but it has not finished its long journey to a kitchen in a Colorado silver camp, and so the men and women of this house share the ladle and the basin and the close oily air with a person whose illness travels precisely by ladle and basin and air, and they do it not from cruelty, but from ignorance, the specific dense ignorance of people doing their reasonable best with knowledge that has not yet arrived. Mary will not put Adeline upstairs with the men, not from any theory of contagion, but from simple decency. A sick woman gets the kitchen cot and the covered water and the warm corner, because that is what you do for a sick woman, and the decency and the danger sit side by side in the same kind gesture, inseparable, because no one yet has the means to separate them. What consumption does on the frontier it does slowly, which is its particular cruelty. It does not strike a person down in an afternoon. It removes them by increment, a little more cough, a little more weight from the face, a little more yellow at the eye, until one week the boarder is at the table and the next week the cot is empty and her few things are packed, and the camp has absorbed one more quiet subtraction without ceremony. Adeline is at the stage where she still mends, still gives advice, still takes her careful evening measure, and this is considered, by the standards of the house, doing well. You can see where the road goes, so can she. Neither of you says so. And underneath the consumption runs the larger fact of what medicine is, and is not out here, which is that there is, for a woman, almost none of it. The doctor is 2 or 3 towns over, charges a day's wages, a visit, and treats mostly the injuries of men, the crush wounds and the bullet wounds and the falls, because those are the emergencies the camp generates and pays to fix. The slow diseases, the female complaints, the long unspooling illnesses, the great dangerous labour of childbirth itself, these fall, when they fall to anyone, to the women, to Mary, who has midwifed more arrivals and sat with more departures than the doctor has, to the keepers and the cooks and the laundresses who have become, by necessity and repetition, the actual medical infrastructure of the frontier for half its population, unpaid, uncredited, and indispensable. Childbirth is the part of this that the storybooks most thoroughly decline, and it is the part that kills the most women, quietly, in back rooms, attended by other women doing their resourceful best with clean rags and boiled water and folk knowledge handed down outside any book, while the doctor, if he comes at all, comes after. A camp that will pay $2 to set a man's broken arm will let a woman labour and bleed with only other women to help her, because the camp's medicine was built around the bodies it valued, and the bodies it valued were the ones that swung the picks. You know this the way you know all of it, as background, as condition, as a thing every woman out here carries the awareness of whether or not she has yet faced it. Adeline folds her handkerchief away and picks up her mending and asks you, mildly, whether you have warm enough stockings for the schoolhouse, because the stove there draws poorly and the floor is cold, and the ordinary kindness of the question, from a dying woman, in a kitchen full of dangers no one can name, undoes you for a moment in a way the dangers themselves have not. You tell her you have wool ones. She nods, satisfied, and goes back to the mending, conserving her breath, treating you as though you are the one who needs looking after, which is, you understand, the last and largest of the things she has to teach you, that you look after each other in the time you have, with the small means you have, and you do not let the size of what you cannot fix stop you from doing the small things you can. Clara is 12, and she hauls the coffee, and empties the pots, and carries the water, and does the 100 small, relentless tasks that keep a 40-man house upright, and she does all of it with the set neutral face of a person who learned long ago that showing how she feels about a task does not reduce the number of times she has to do it. You have been watching her since the first morning, because Clara is, of everyone in this building, the one your presence is actually about, whether or not anyone has said so, because you are the schoolteacher, and Clara is a child who is not in school. She cannot read past the simplest words. You establish this gently, over the coffee, across several mornings, the way you establish anything with a wary child, not by asking, which would shame her, but by leaving a primer on the bench where she would find it, open as though by accident, and watching her sound out the first line with her lips moving and then close it fast when she felt you near. She wants it. That is the thing that goes into you and stays. She wants the letters with a hunger she has been trained not to show, and she is not in school. And she is not in school because her mother needs her hands more than the future needs her literacy, and both of those things are true and only one of them is fair. This is the arithmetic that the West runs on and the storybooks never show, the arithmetic that turns a bright 12-year-old into a pair of hands. A widow keeping a house alone cannot also do the hauling and the emptying, and the carrying, and the cheapest, nearest, most reliable labour available to her is her own daughter. And so the daughter hauls, and the hauling fills the hours that school would fill, and the girl who could learn does not, because the household that her unschooled labour sustains is the same household that would have to pay someone else if she stopped. Clara is mortgaged to the survival of the very house that should be sending her to you. You see your own past in her, faintly, and your own near future too. You were a girl who got the letters somehow, against some version of the same odds, and the letters are the entire reason you are a person with a contract and a wage and a bolt instead of a girl mortgaged to a kitchen. And you can see with awful clarity the Clara who does not get them, who hauls coffee until she is old enough to marry or old enough to be sent 2 doors down, whose intelligence goes nowhere because the town it was born into had a use for her hands and no use for her mind. The distance between you and Clara is one lucky childhood and a few hundred letters, so you teach her. Not formally, there is no formal route, her mother's need is real and not yours to overrule, but in the cracks, in the coffee minutes, in the small accidental way you teach a child who has been taught not to ask, a word on the bench, A letter traced in spilled flour and wiped away before it can be a thing anyone has to have an opinion about. A book left where it falls. You do it, knowing you are boarding round, that you will be gone in weeks to the next family, that you cannot finish what you start with her, and you do it anyway, because the alternative is to do nothing, and a few letters smuggled to a hungry child are not nothing, even when they are not enough. Clara takes the coffee pot back to the stove and sets it down with her small controlled thud, and on her way past the bench she palms the primer you left there and slides it into her apron with the swift, guilty efficiency of a child stealing food, and your heart does a thing in your chest that you do not let reach your face. She did not ask. You did not offer. The book simply moved from the bench to the apron, by accident, the way the square of clean linen will move, the way everything has to move in a world that will not let a girl like Clara simply be given what she needs. You go to open the schoolhouse. Behind you, in the apron, the letters go with her. You sit down with Mary on a Friday, between the dinner clear and the supper preparation, to settle what you owe and to understand what comes next. And the conversation is short and unsentimental and entirely about money, which is the conversation that actually governs a woman's life out here underneath all the conversations about reputation and marriage that everyone would rather have instead. You will not be at Mary's much longer. You will board round, the district's arrangement, a month here, a month there, lodging with each student's family in rotation as part of your pay, and the boarding round is both a mercy and a sentence, and you are about to live inside the difference. The wage is the foundation of everything, and the wage is an insult, and you have stopped being surprised by it without ever quite making peace with it. You earn, for teaching every child in this camp, roughly a third of what the district would pay a man to do the identical work, and the part of you that does arithmetic notes that you earn less than Mary's cook, less than a competent laundress, less in coin than several of the women whose respectability the town ranks below your own. The town pays for what it values, and it values a woman's mind at a discount it has written directly into the contract, and the discount is not negotiable, because the supply of women desperate enough to teach for it has never yet run short. Boarding round is how the district closes the gap between what it pays you and what you need to live, by arranging that you do not pay rent, by passing you from family to family like a shared implement, and the families take you in because the contract obliges them, and feed you from their own table and give you, if you are lucky, a real bed in a real room. And if you are not lucky, the corner a Wisconsin teacher once described, where the snow blew in through the gaps and gathered on the blanket, and, some mornings, in it. You will get both kinds of room. You will have no say in which. The board decides the rotation, and the rotation is not a thing a woman earning a third of a man's wage gets to decline. You ask Mary because Mary has watched a great many teachers come through on the stage, what the trick of it is, the trick of boarding round, and Mary gives you the answer in the flat economical way she gives everything, which is that the trick is to be a good guest and a forgettable one, to take up no more room than the contract requires, to praise the cooking and mean it, to keep your business behind whatever door the house provides, and your opinions behind your teeth, and to leave each family with nothing to say about you except that you are no trouble. No trouble, Mary says, is the highest praise a boarding round teacher can earn, and it is also, she does not need to add, a diminishment, because no trouble is what you say about a piece of furniture. She offers you, before you go, the standing arrangement that she offers the teachers she has decided are worth keeping in her rotation, which is that the closet behind the chimney is yours whenever the boarding round leaves you between families, at the same $2, no haggling, the bolt and the covered water and the first basin included, because Mary has decided you are no trouble in the way she means it as praise. You take it. It is the nearest thing to a home address you will have for the length of your contract, a 6x8 closet you can rent at a premium when the rotation strands you, and you are genuinely grateful for it, which tells you everything about how thin the margins of your independence actually are. You settle the account. You shake Mary's hand, which is calloused, hard, and certain. The money changes hands and the arrangement is made, and you are, by the standards of a woman alone on the frontier, doing well, employed, respectable, housed between families, with a keeper who will hold a room for you. It is a good outcome, steady, respectable, and entirely real. It is also a third of a man's wage and a rotation you cannot refuse, and a closet you rent by the night, and both of those are the same outcome, seen from the two ends of the only kind of independence the town was willing to sell you, There is a kerosene lamp on the kitchen shelf that Mary keeps burning low all night because she wants the house to be navigable in the dark, so that a man can find the stairs and the outhouse without breaking his neck, so that Clara can move if she's needed, so that the building is never entirely blind. And the lamp does its job, and does a second job nobody asked it to, which is to deposit, hour by hour, a thin, oily film on the shelf, the ceiling, the warm brick of your chimney wall, and, invisibly, the inside of every lung in the building. You breathe it all night. Everyone breathes it all night. It is simply the texture of the air in a kerosene-lit house, and you stop noticing it within a day, which is either adaptation or the beginning of damage, and is, the histories suggest, both. The film is the small, slow danger. The lamp's larger danger is the one you think about as you lie behind the chimney, which is fire, because this building is a dark, draughty, and green pine fire trap of exactly the kind that has burned whole camps to the ground, and you know the dates the way everyone out here knows the dates. Virginia City in 75, Deadwood in 79, and you know that in both cases the fire began in a kitchen, and you are sleeping in a closet that shares a wall with the kitchen, 6 feet from the stove, behind a chimney that runs hot all night. The warmth that makes your closet bearable is the same warmth that could, on the wrong night, make it a flue. And then there is your window, which is painted shut, and which you tested on the first night and filed as a feature, because a window that does not open is a window an intruder does not come through. You revise the filing now, lying in the dark doing the fire arithmetic, because a window that will not open is also a window you cannot leave by, and the only other way out of your closet is the door, and the door opens onto the kitchen, and the kitchen is where the fire would start. The defences you built against the human danger, the painted window, the bolt, the chair, the trunk, are, every one of them, an obstacle to escaping the other danger. You have fortified yourself so thoroughly against the men that you have sealed yourself in with the fire. So you choose, the way every woman in your position chooses, which danger to defend against, and you defend against the one with a face, because the one with a face has, in the long ledger of what happens to women alone, come for more of them than the fire has. You keep the bolt, you keep the chair, you accept the window. You lie in the warm dark doing the math that has no good answer, and you make the same peace with it that you make with everything, which is the peace of a person who has counted the exits, found them wanting, and decided to sleep anyway because the shift comes at 5. Before you finally go down, you do the one thing the math does allow, which is to know precisely where everything is. Boots here, where your hand finds them. Trunk there. The bolt that lifts if you raise the door on its hinge. The chair that comes away with one pull. If the worst comes, you will lose the seconds the window would have given you, but you will not lose the seconds that fumbling would cost, and seconds are the whole currency of a fire in a green pine house, and a woman who has counted her seconds in advance has done the only preparation the situation permits. You count them. You set them in your mind like a row of pins. Then you let the warm brick take your weight and you sleep, sealed in, ready, and as safe as the arithmetic allows, which is to say, enough, you hope, and no more than enough. A man arriving in a town like Dodge or Tombstone hands his pistol across the counter, because the ordinance requires it, and receives a numbered wooden chit, and gets the gun back when he leaves, and the whole ritual of frontier disarmament is built around the assumption that the dangerous object is the one the man carries, and the safe place is the one he is entering. You carry no pistol. You hand nothing across the counter. And the assumption the ritual is built on does not describe your situation at all, because for you the danger was never an object you could check at the door. It is the situation itself, the standing condition of being a woman alone in a town of men, and there is no counter you can hand that across, and no chit that gives you a night off from it. The men's violence, you have learned, is mostly lateral, men against men, over a bed slot or a card or a slight, conducted with the knives and razors the ordinances forgot to mention, settled and forgotten by morning, a closed economy of grievance that rarely turns your way. You are not afraid of the razor fight in the men's room. The razor fight is their business and stays their business. What you are afraid of is the rarer, quieter, less discussed thing that the histories record in the gaps and the court ledgers and the sentences that trail off, the violence that comes for women specifically, that does not announce itself with a drawn knife in a lit room, that arrives instead through a door in the dark and depends entirely on there being no witness and no consequence. That is the danger the bolt is for. That is the danger that has no chit. So the bolt is your pistol, and the chair is your second pistol, and the trunk is your third, and Mary's rules are the holster they all sit in, and your own unbroken watchfulness is the hand that never quite leaves the grip. A man's protection is a thing he can set down on a counter and pick up at the edge of town. Yours you carry every hour, awake and asleep, and you cannot check it, and you cannot forget it, and there is no town limit past which you get it back, because you never handed it over in the first place. You think sometimes about what it would mean to carry an actual weapon, and you know women who do, a small pistol in a muff, a blade in a boot, the quiet arsenal of women who have decided not to depend on bolts, and you understand the logic and you have not yet chosen it, because a respectable schoolteacher found to be armed is a schoolteacher with a story attached, and the story would cost you the category that is itself your largest protection. So you go unarmed by choice, defended by architecture and reputation and a keeper's dowel, and you accept that your safety is outsourced to a bent iron bolt and a woman with a stick and the fragile general agreement that the schoolteacher is not to be touched, and you know exactly how thin every layer of that is, and you sleep behind it because it is what there is. You go to the covered pail in the morning for the water you will wash and drink with, and you take it from the covered one and not the open one, by Mary's quiet arrangement, and you have stopped wondering whether this makes a real difference and started simply trusting the lid the way you trust the bolt, which is to say provisionally and completely at once. You do wonder, sometimes, where any of the water comes from, and you have worked out the geography, and the geography is not reassuring, and you have decided, like everyone, to drink anyway, because the alternative to drinking is not an alternative. The water comes from a well at the front of the lot, and the outhouse sits at the back of the lot, and between them is perhaps 50 feet of the same tamped earth that 40 pairs of boots cross twice a day, and the well and the pit are conducting, through that 50 feet of ground, a slow and entirely silent conversation that nobody in 1879 has the science to overhear. The germ does not yet have a name that a Colorado camp would recognize. The connection between the pit and the well, and the fevers that move through houses like this is suspected by a few and proven by none, and acted on by almost no one, and so the well keeps drawing, and the pit keeps filling, and the 50 feet of earth keeps translating one into the other, patiently, beneath everyone's notice. You know the names of what the water carries even if the camp does not, because you have read more than the camp has. Typhoid, which struck Tombstone hard. Cholera, which emptied river towns by the thousand in a bad year, and you know they travel by exactly this route, the pit to the ground, to the well, to the cup, and you know that the covered pail Mary reserves for the women is drawn from the same well as the open one, and protected only from what falls in after, not from what was in the water when it was drawn. The lid is real protection against the day's sheddings, and no protection at all against the deeper thing. You drink the covered water because it is the better of two gambles, not because it is safe, and you hold both of those facts at once, because holding both at once is simply what it means to drink water on the frontier. The boy who hauls the water, there is always a boy, here it is a thin grave child named Tom who works for his board, does not ask where the water should come from or worry about where it has been, because nobody is paying him to ask or to worry, only to move it from the well to the pail without spilling most of it, which he does, 3/4 successfully, which is the system, which is fine. Tom hauls, Clara empties, the well draws, the pit fills, the 50 feet of ground does its quiet translation, and every person in the house drinks the result every morning and attributes whatever sickness follows to the altitude or the air or the work, because the water looks clean, and the water nearly always looks clean, and looking clean is the only test the camp has the means to run. You drink your cup of covered water, and you do not get sick this morning, which is worth something, and you carry the not getting sick out into the day the way you carry every small mercy, provisionally, knowing tomorrow runs the gamble again with the same odds and the same unnamed stakes. It is managed by a lid and a hope and a daily decision to drink anyway, because the work comes at 5, and the body needs water, and the only water there is the water the ground has been quietly editing all night. You wake at 2 in the morning to a knock at the front door of the boarding house, and you lie absolutely still behind your bolt and your chair, because a knock at 2 in the morning is never good news and is sometimes very bad news, and the only sensible response to either is to become, as completely as possible, a person who is asleep and hears nothing. You hear Mary's tread on the stairs. You hear the bolt of the front door draw back. You hear low voices in the hall, Several of them, men's, kept deliberately quiet in the way men keep their voices quiet when they know the whole house is awake and listening, and they would all prefer to pretend otherwise. It is the Vigilance Committee. You understand this before you understand how you understand it, from the number of the voices and the hour and the particular flat courtesy in them, and the Vigilance Committee has come, as it comes, to remove a man from his bed, to take him out into the dark for something he did or something he is said to have done, and to settle it the way the camp settles things that fall between the reach of the county sheriff one way and the size of a hanging the other. There is no law here at 2 a.m. except the men in the hall and whatever Mary decides to do about them. And what Mary decides to do, you can hear, is exactly what a woman running a 40-man house has learned to do, which is to be steady, to give them no reason to make it worse, and to keep her voice level enough that the house cannot tell from the sound of it whether she is frightened. You do not get up. You keep your eyes half open in the dark, and you do not move your head, and you breathe the slow, even breath of the unconscious, and through the floor you track the thing by ear the way you have tracked everything in this house by ear. The footsteps come up the stairs, 3 sets, unhurried, the unhurried tread of men who feel they have time and the law on whatever side they have decided is the law. A lantern moves. You see its light slide along the gap under your door, slow and searching, and you hold your breath as it passes, because for 1 cold second the light is at your threshold, and you do not know whether the bolt that has protected you all night will be read, by men in this mood, as protection or as something to be answered. The light moves on. They are not here for you. They are never here for you. They say a name in the men's room, a name that is not yours, and there is a sound that is not quite a word from somewhere among the bunks, and a brief interval of shuffling and low voices, and then the footsteps go back down the stairs with 1 more set added to the count than came up. You hear the front door. You hear Mary's bolt go home. You hear her tread, slower now, return up the stairs to her own room, and pause, for just a moment, outside the kitchen passage, on the women's side, near your door, checking. You understand, in the only way she can without speaking, that the disturbance has not reached the closet behind the chimney. You lie still. She moves on. Neither of you will ever mention it. In the morning there will be a body at the edge of town, or there will not, and a bunk will be empty. And the empty bunk will be re-let by sundown to a man who arrived on the stage with 2 bits and no questions, and nobody will ask Mary what happened, and Mary will not volunteer it, and the sheet on the empty bunk will not be changed before the new man lies down in it. You will come out to breakfast and the table will be 1 man shorter and no one will name the subtraction, and you will eat your 11 minutes and say your calibrated good mornings, and carry the night's knowledge folded away with all your other folded knowledge, because that is what you do with the things this house teaches you at 2 a.m. You fold them small, along the established creases, and you keep them, and you do not let them show on your face when you go to open the school. Mary Murphy is not the only widow running a house in the territories, and over your weeks in the camp you assemble, from her and from the stage and from the talk that moves woman to woman beneath the talk of the men, a quiet map of them, a whole dispersed sisterhood of keepers, each one a woman who looked at the arithmetic of a boom town and saw, where the men saw silver, the surer fortune in feeding and bedding the men who chased it. There is a widow named Hattie Cole in Cheyenne who runs 32 beds and keeps a brass bell by the door instead of a painted board. There is an Ada Sims in Bodie who put in a second outhouse and charges an extra nickel for the use of it, and considers the nickel a moral instrument. There is a woman in Tombstone who never gave her real name to the county at all, who runs her books under a man's name she invented, and pays the merchant in coin from a leather pouch she sleeps with under her pillow. They are, every one of them, doing the thing the West least expected a woman to do, which is hold power, real, unromantic, operational power, the power to set a rate and enforce a rule, and refuse a man a bed and answer a door at 2 a.m. and run, single-handed, an institution that 40 grown men depend on and obey. The frontier mythology has no comfortable place for them. The storybooks want the woman to be the schoolmarm being courted, or the wife being settled, or the dance-hall girl being saved, and the widow-keeper is none of those. The widow-keeper is the one running the building all 3 of them are standing in, and the mythology mostly solves the problem by leaving her out. You understand, watching Mary, exactly how she came by the power and exactly what it cost, because the 2 are the same thing. She did not inherit it or marry into it. She arrived at it by surviving the things that were supposed to destroy a woman, 2 husbands into the ground, a child to raise alone, a lease on a falling down building in a town that could empty out the month the assay figures came back wrong, and she converted the survival itself into a business, because survival was the one skill the frontier had given her in abundance, and a boarding house is, when you look at it clearly, simply survival sold by the night to people who have not yet learned how to do it themselves. Mary sells what she knows. What she knows is how to keep going. The 40 men pay 50 cents a night to sleep inside her competence. And the cost of the power is legible too, in the flatness of her, the watchful, unmoved, and faintly forbidding quality you misread on the first morning as coldness, and now read correctly as armour worn so long it has fused. A woman cannot run a house of 40 men by being warm. Warmth is an opening, and an opening gets tested, and Mary closed every opening years ago and keeps them closed by reflex. And the closing is not a personality, it is a uniform, put on each morning over whatever woman is underneath it. A woman you will never meet, because meeting her is a luxury. Mary cannot afford to extend to a boarding-round teacher passing through. She would tell you, if she told you anything, that it was a fair trade, and that she would make it again. You will carry the map of the keepers with you onto the boarding round and beyond it, because the map is, in a way, your inheritance from this house. The knowledge that there is a sisterhood of them out there, the bell women and the pouch women and the invented name women, holding their hard-won, unromantic power in towns all across the territories, and that you, with your contract and your trunk and your third of a man's wage, are a younger and differently cornered member of the same order. Women who found, in a country built to keep them dependent, the one or two narrow trades that let them stand on their own, and who paid for the standing in exactly the coin Mary paid, which is the warmth they were no longer allowed to risk. You are at the beginning of that price. Mary is a long way into it. The distance between you is years and 2 dead husbands and 1,000 answered doors. You leave Mary's on a Monday, because the boarding round has called you to the first family on the rotation, and a teacher goes where the rotation sends her, and your leaving takes about as long as your livelihood is large, which is to say 4 minutes, because everything you own goes back into the trunk it came out of, and the trunk is the whole of your estate. The 2 dresses, folded, the comb, the slate, the primer, the 41 books, settled back into the order that survived the stage road. The contract back in its glove. The small square of clean linen, minus the one that fell, by accident, into Clara's reach, and the other one that fell, by the same useful accident, a week later, because some accidents are worth repeating. Mary settles the account at the counter where it began, and she hands you back nothing because there was nothing to hold back, your $2 a night having bought exactly $2 a night of Bolton water and first basin, and she shakes your hand with the same dry certainty she shook it with on the first morning, and she tells you the closet behind the chimney is yours whenever the rotation strands you, at the same rate, no haggling, which is the warmest sentence Mary Murphy has it in her to say, and which you receive as the considerable gift it is. You have been, by Mary's own measure, no trouble. It is, you have learned, the highest thing she says about anyone, and you have decided to be proud of it rather than diminished by it, because pride is cheaper and travels better. Clara carries your satchel to the stage, which is not her job and which Mary permits. And at the stage, Clara does a thing she has not done in all your weeks, which is to look at you directly and hold it, and in her apron, you know, is a primer and 2 squares of clean linen and a folded paper on which you wrote, in your best schoolroom hand, the whole alphabet, and beneath it the few words a hungry child could build from it, a thing she can study by lamplight after the pots are emptied, alone, the way she does everything. You do not say goodbye in a way that would require her to perform a feeling in public. You say you expect she will know her letters by the time you come back through, which is half a promise and half a charge, and Clara nods once, the set, neutral, and practiced nod, and you see what it costs her to keep it neutral, and you let her keep it, because the dignity of not crying at a stage is one of the few dignities the town has left her, and you will not take it for your own comfort. The stage is a mud wagon, really, the cheaper kind, and you climb up into it the way you climbed down from it weeks ago, and you settle the trunk where you can keep a hand near it, because the trunk is your livelihood and your character, and your one argument for who you are, and a woman keeps a hand near her argument on a frontier road. The driver clucks the team up. The camp begins to slide backward. Mary's house. The bathhouse where Mrs. Pell carved out the ladies' hour, the laundry where Lan keeps her perfect accounts, the dance hall where Belle runs her parallel kingdom, the schoolhouse with its poor-drawing stove, the whole small, thin-distanced world you learned in a few weeks to read like a page. You do not look back for long, because looking back is a luxury, and the road ahead has a family on it, and the family has children, and the children do not know any of what this town cost, the women who kept it running, and it is not your job to teach them that. It is your job to teach them their letters. You face forward, the trunk rides at your knee. Somewhere behind you, Clara is walking back to the house with an alphabet in her apron, and somewhere ahead of you is a room you have not seen, which will be a good room, or the kind with snow in the bed, and you will not know which until you arrive. And either way, you will bolt the door and wedge the chair and set the trunk against it, because the architecture of a woman's night does not change with the address. Only the address changes, and the address is changing now, and you ride toward it with your livelihood at your knee, and your watchfulness already packed. The first thing you do at every new posting, before the children, before the lessons, before anything the storybooks would recognize as teaching, is light the stove, because the schoolhouse is yours to keep as well as yours to run, and a schoolteacher on the frontier is also the janitor, the fire tender, the water hauler, and the first person cold in the building every morning. You arrive in the dark, you lay the fire, you haul the water, you sweep the floor that will be dirty by noon. The contract that pays you a third of a man's wage to teach also expects you to be the building's entire domestic staff, and the expectation is so total that it is not even written down because no one imagined a woman might consider it worth mentioning. You light the stove, and the schoolhouse begins, slowly, to become survivable, the way every space you have occupied out here becomes survivable, not given to you warm but warmed by your own labour, in the dark, before anyone arrives to benefit from it. By the time the first child comes through the door, stamping the cold off small boots, the room is something like comfortable, and the child has no idea that the comfort was manufactured by the teacher in the hour before dawn, and that is exactly as it should be, because the labour that shows is labour that has failed. The whole art of it is to make the warmth look like it was simply there. The children come in their 2s and 3s, and among them, if the town is the kind of town you hope for, are girls. Girls who will get the letters, girls for whom you are the proof that a woman can stand at the front of a room and hold authority and be paid, however badly, for the work of her own mind. Girls who will carry out of your schoolhouse the one thing that turned you from a Clara mortgage to a kitchen into a woman with a contract and a trunk and a name of her own. You cannot give them the wage you wish they would someday earn. You cannot strike the marriage bar from the contract they will one day sign or close the gap between a third and a whole. You can give them the letters, which is where all of it starts, which is the thin thread you yourself were pulled to safety by, and which is, in the end, the entire reason you came west and bolted the doors and rode the rotation and turned down the hat-twisting men. You teach the day. The stove holds. The light comes up over a camp that will spend the rest of the day pretending the women who keep it running are not the reason it runs, and you do your part of the keeping the way Mary does hers and Mrs. Pell does hers, and Lan does hers, and Belle does hers, 2 doors apart, on every side of every line, the whole uncounted infrastructure of women holding up a country that has not yet thought to thank them, and largely never will. You do not need the thanks. You have the letters, and the girls in front of you, and the slow conviction that some of them will get further than you did, on the thread you are handing them, into a century you will not see. And at the end of the day you will bank the stove, and lock the schoolhouse, and walk back to whatever room the rotation has given you, and bolt the door, and wedge the chair, and set the trunk against it, and loosen 2 laces, and lie down in your clothes with one hand near your boots, and listen to a new house breathe, and run the same arithmetic you have run every night since the stage, and sleep, eventually, the watchful frontier sleep that is the only kind on offer. The schoolhouse will be cold again tomorrow. You will light it again tomorrow. That is the work, and the work, you have decided, is worth the price of it, which is steep, and paid nightly, and yours. You have survived a single night in a Wild West boarding house, and then another, and another, which is the part the title never tells you, that for a woman it was never a single night, it was every night, managed alone, behind whatever door would lock, by the light of whatever lamp there was. And you did it. You are still doing it. Tomorrow you will haul the water and light the stove, and hand another child the letters, and the camp will not notice, and you will not need it to. And so here we are at the end of the frontier night, which was not, it turns out, the one in the storybooks either. You've done a great deal, and most of it was holding still. You paid 4 times a man's rate for the privilege of a door that locked. You slept laced into your own clothes with a chair tilted under the knob. You carried your reputation through a room of 40 strangers the way you'd carry a full cup down a moving stage, carefully and without spilling a drop. You ate fast, said little, and turned down a marriage you were never offered the time to consider. You managed a body in a building that gave you nowhere to do it. Mary Murphy is already in the kitchen by the time you stand up, because Mary Murphy is always already in the kitchen. The iron pot is heating, the ledger is open, the bolt you trusted all night is just a bent piece of iron in daylight, and the next teacher to come through on the stage will pay for it exactly what you did, and think, exactly as you did, that it was worth it. Take a moment, if you would, to appreciate your bed. Find the cool side of the pillow. The door is yours, and it locks, and nobody had to grant you that for a fee. The sheets are cold because you put them on fresh, not because you are the only woman who would say no. There is, somewhere nearby, a room with a latch that has never once been the most important object in your life. Nobody is going to propose to you over breakfast. Nobody is keeping a column in a ledger with your conduct in it. Let your shoulders drop. Let the pillow take the whole weight of your head. Let the quiet settle over the room like fresh snow on a road nobody is travelling. The bolt has gone back to being an ordinary thing. The trunk is just a trunk. The piano 2 doors down has finally, mercifully, stopped. Sleep well.